Welcome back to You and Your Money. If you have just joined us, we're talking today about short-term insurance with Brian Hirsch, Edite, Teixeira, McKinon and Anton Ossip, all joining us in the Zoom room. Now, Edite, we have spoken about business interruption and travel claims and things like that. There's actually a question from Rochelle in Wadeville saying, how does the Ombud handle business interruption complaints? Maybe you can give us an update at the same time.
So we are approached broadly speaking, and I say broadly speaking because each matter is determined on its own facts. A general approach, so to speak. When it comes to business interruption, those policies that traditionally cover you for the interruption of your business or cover you, or that cover kicks in if there's been physical damage to the premises itself. So obviously with COVID-19, that doesn't apply. It's not physical damage to the building, and we cover for business interruption. Obviously, if the policy doesn't provide cover, then we can't reconstitute the policy to make the cover exist. We just can't, in those instances, come to the assistance of policyholders. But where there is that extension relating to infectious and contagious diseases, which COVID is, then we have pay very particular attention to the wording. Not all the wordings are the same, but what we've decided to do in those cases, given that there are matters before the courts that are going to be deciding the issue of proximate cause, in other words, what is the proximate cause of that business interruption? Is it COVID-19 or is it the government-imposed lockdowns? We've decided that we're going to wait for the court decisions in those matters. Our terms of reference require us to apply the law and then to look, where appropriate, at fairness and equity. So we always have to start with the law, and currently the law is not certain. That's why the parties have taken these matters to court in order to get some legal certainty around the principles and how it applies to policy wordings around the issue of proximate cause. So we've decided that we're going to wait for those decisions before we finalize some of the matters in our office.
Brian, from your perspective, what are your thoughts there?
Well, my thought, very simply, a lot of businesses will not survive without payments. And we talk about court action, but, court action sometimes drags on very slowly. So, Anton, I'd be interested to know from the industry's point of view, if you think about it, people who've claimed now short of money, can't get funds, can't raise funds. I mean, the likelihood if this court action just drags on for the next year or two, I would have thought that this was rather an urgent action rather than just a normal court action.
I mean, Brian, you're right. I mean, from the perspective of it's no point having payments years later if the businesses won't be around to enjoy them. I think firstly, maybe just to say that Discovery doesn't offer cover wider than the physical damage cover. So this is not an issue that applies to us, and therefore I'm not that close to some of the court specifics. But kind of from the outside sort of looking in, I think a number of the insurance companies did provide interim payments, so particularly focused on the smaller business that needed some sort of interim relief, and some of them offered them as a kind of an ex gratia because it's not really a claim until the courts have ruled on it. But they offered some relief for the smaller, really on the smaller end of the business side to give them some cash flow to hopefully survive over the next couple of months until the economy sort of opens up again. But it's a difficult one because they're two very, very different sides of the fence. Clients with a certain view, they were under a certain impression in terms of what was covered, and insurance companies having a very different view. And legally, it's got to be ruled upon. Otherwise, you're going to get no settlement until the courts make a decision. So, there was one decision that's been taken on appeal. I believe there's some other decisions that are pending over the next couple of weeks with another insurer. So hopefully we'll get some sort of direction on the way forward soon, because it's not good, obviously, from a reputation, from the insurance industry's perspective. Obviously there are many clients that are affected. So everyone just wants clarity one way or another on how it's going to sort of play out going forward. And it's of no value for it to play out over the next 2-3 years. It's too long.
Edite, just on that point, are you seeing that insurance companies are evolving their offerings, or is it just too risky to be covering things comprehensively for pandemics, which we just never know if they're going to come or not?
So I think what we've seen are two consequences of the COVID-19 types of complaints in our office. It's obviously brought a lot of awareness about insurance, and it has, made people think about the value of insurance and having the right cover. But on the other hand, what we've also seen as a reaction to this pandemic is insurers changing their offering, where a lot of them are already rethinking whether they will provide any cover for a pandemic going forward and endorsing policies, which again is a concern. And as long as insurers do it with proper notice to consumers or to their policy holders, there's not much that OSTI can do in terms of the changes to those covers. So that's one of the consequences of this pandemic. There is, of course, less of an appetite to cover these types of disasters going forward.
Brian, in your perspective, how would you think clients are reacting to these decisions to not cover things?
Yeah, let's just talk more generally. The problem with so many clients is they just don't understand what they're insured for. I've always said this: you need to read your policies, you need to understand the conditions, and you need to understand the exclusions. So often people think they're insured from A to Z, and they're not, because their policy is very specific. And so it's not only we're talking about travel or we're talking about business interruption, we talk about all insurance. It's a very difficult thing to read in short-term insurance policy. Years gone by, they used to say what the bold print gave you on the front of the cover, the small print took away. Well, that's not the same anymore. So, because a lot of it today is in readable form, but people just don't read their short-term insurance. They don't understand. So we're not just talking about one level of policy. We talk about all your policies. And I always say, read your policy, understand what you're insured for, understand your sums assured, understand the quantity that you're insured for. Are you adequately insured? Understand the most important thing, conditions. You've got a householder's policy and all this policy. Understand safe conditions. Understand burglar alarm protection, all those things. Don't just expect that you've got a policy, you have a claim, you're going to get paid. And that's why we call it a grudge purchase. Because so often people say, I'm not being settled and I've had a claim and I'm always having claims and I'm never getting paid. Those are statements made by many policyholders, which actually gives the industry a very bad name. Over the years, much better name than what it was. I mean, there was a company many years ago that said, we don't hassle, we pay. And everyone said, no, you don't pay, you hassle. So very much changed the industry.
I suppose as to our point earlier when we were talking about people staying informed, the onus is on the insurer to inform their clients of things, but also the onus is on the insured person to understand all the information and communication that's being sent through, and if not, ask the questions. Which does lead to another question we've got here. I'm going to point this one to you, Anton. It's from a short-term broker who says, why should we be honest with our insurer as they always beat you down on your claim?
So, Michael, I mean, obviously that's a perception of the individual that's writing in, and it's a very unfortunate perception because that's not how we see it as insurers. Insurance companies pay out billions of rands every single year to put people back into the position they were in beforehand. I can only talk about my own organisation. The level of claims not paid or the repudiation rate is minuscule. It's like 1%. It's like 99% are paid. But sometimes the perception, the expectation is where the problem lies. As Brian said, sometimes you're expecting, 100 units to be paid out and you've only got cover for 80. Or you underinsured your items. So if you've got 100,000 rands worth of items in your house, but you're only insuring 50,000 of them, then you're paying a premium based on 50,000, not 100,000. So you're going to get paid out half what you expected ultimately at the end of the day, and that may leave people with the wrong perception. Or you're paying a low premium because you've told your insurance company you have a burglar alarm, but actually at the end of the day you never use your burglar alarm. You never put it on. It doesn't work. It's not linked to anyone. So therefore it's not a burglar alarm. It's not going to do anything to reduce the risk. And that's where sometimes clients not understanding what their cover is, gets clients to be upset. And it creates this negative perception of insurance, which is quite unfortunate because, as I say, billions and billions of rands are paid out every single month in insurance claims. I mean, my own business, we pay about 200 million rand every single month in insurance claims. So, 10 million rand every single working day paid out in insurance claims, and that's the majority of what people are claiming for. There's very little that doesn't get ultimately paid. But those few that don't get paid obviously creates the wrong perception. And it's our job to ensure that the policies are written in English, people understand what they're covered and what they're not covered for. And can we do a better job? Absolutely. Can we communicate better? Absolutely. So there's always room for improvement on both sides. I think the ombudsman role is a fantastic role because they play that independent party and they can just put some put some rationality into the argument to say that, yes, you're expecting so much to be paid, but actually, you paid a premium for a different amount, and therefore you can't expect that. So it's a difficult one, Brian and Michael, and I hope we can change the perception over time. Certainly, it's a lot better, than it was many, many years ago, where insurance companies had such a bad reputation that it felt that all they were doing was trying to find a way not to pay the claim. And that comes out very clearly. Edite's stats, and she can maybe tell everyone about it, but it's the most impartial, the most kind of, the most objective stats you can possibly get are going to come from the Ombudsman, because they've got no reason to favour one over another.
Yeah. And Edite, in terms of the COVID-19 situation, once again, are you expecting an increase in repudiations over the next period?
I think our office experienced an increase in the number of COVID-19 related complaints June, July, August. We're actually seeing a decline in those complaints to our office. I just want to pick up on what Anton also said. There's no obligation on an insurer to go through every single policy term and condition. And that's whether there's a broker or whether you've taken out the policy directly with the insurer. There is no such obligation. The insurer's obligation is to draw your attention to concisely point out certain essential terms and conditions, and perhaps unusual terms and conditions, but not to go through the entire policy with you over a telephone call. So there's definitely an obligation on you as a party to the contract to familiarize yourself with the terms and conditions. We see and we have a high proportion of complaints coming to our office around homeowners, buildings claims, where insureds still believe that if there's a storm and the roof has leaked, that they will be covered. But if the insurer has established that the roof leaks not because of the storm, but because you haven't maintained your roof, then you're not going to be covered for that damage. And that continues to remain a high proportion of complaints in our office, even with as much as insurers try to do to educate consumers and our office, we still see that trend.
Okay, Brian, we are sadly just about out of time. This has been a very interesting discussion, but we've flown through it. Final thoughts from your side before we wrap up?
Well, I must apologise. There are a lot of emails that came in that haven't been answered. We know the subject just got wider. I know it's a boring subject, short-term insurance, and no one wants to really read their short-term insurance policy before going to bed. It's actually a very good way of falling asleep. But we'll pick it up again in the new year. This is our last program for short-term this year, but we'll certainly pick it up in the new year. All those questions, my apologies. Just remember one thing, both the Ombudsman and the short-term insurance are there to try and see that you are indemnified correctly when you have a claim. They're not independent, they're not foes, and you have that opportunity where an insurance company has repudiated a claim to refer it to the Ombuds office, who will independently, don't work for insurers, they'll independently look at it and give their reports to insurers in terms of what they think they should be doing.
There's always some great thoughts from you, Brian. I would like to thank Brian, Edite and Anton for joining me this evening. Please do note that our program is to provide information and should not be construed as advice. Until next time, have a great evening. Goodbye.